just to try and keep the game going, because when people get that don't know how to manage their money to begin with, have no credit history, and they get the credit cards, then they feel like they're rich. They're going to go out and spend, and that will stimulate the economy. That's right. Exactly why they're doing it, to keep, and they've been, I mean, this is the latest piece of that, but you look at the Experian boost your credit rating, boost this. I mean, they've been really reducing the requirements to get credit. But isn't that kind of what they did in the lead up to the housing crisis? Go ahead, get as much house as you can afford on this variable rate, because you can always refinance. And then who ended up eating it? I really think the Fed is doing one heck of a good job with that. So it is. Yeah, right. I don't know how much more help they need to create all those dollars. But I think it could also, yes, go along with that, as well as the UBI. I mean, it is getting people to spend, and it's more dollars chasing a finite number of goods. And that definitely will bring in the hyperinflation that they need to repay this debt with dollars that have zero value. So yeah, that certainly could be one of the ways. But, we've been hearing about this. We want everybody to participate in the financial system. I mean, and even giving credit cards and debit cards to young kids so that they can learn how to, manage. So yeah, I think the expansion of the credit is about getting the consumer to consume. I think it's all about getting the consumer to consume. But here's the thing with that, right? They know that we're at the end of this whole cycle. So it's kind of like, if you're declaring bankruptcy anyway, and you get a credit card in the mail, the most likely outcome is that you're going to go spend that money.
Right.
Right? Now, you kind of wonder whose benefit that's for, but we've already been shown that the banks will be bailed out. And this morning, when they were talking, the banks were in front of the House Senate Committee on Banking, and they talked about the fact that the loans were down. I mean, it was pretty interesting to listen to all these banks tout how good they're doing with extending credit to, small businesses and those in the minorities, et cetera, et cetera. And then hear that ripped apart. But you're absolutely right. The loans are going down as they're taking in and holding a whole lot more savings. And the savings rate, I think, is up to like 27.3% right now, which shows loss of confidence. Just had recently checked the monetary velocity chart to see if that had started going up. And it's down again. So even with all of this new income and all of this shopping, I mean, you have to watch it because it's a lagging indicator. But that's when I think we're going to really see, when we see it go up in a pervasive way. And that's what they're pushing to do. So with the credit cards, I think it's more about spending and stimulus and, yes, generating that inflation, but not necessarily about creating new dollars, though you're absolutely right. It does. That's how money's created in the system. But I think it's more about spending. Yeah, and this is actually something that I want to talk about more in more depth, at your event. But you follow my mantra: food, water, energy security, barterability, wealth preservation, community, and shelter. And so really, I've been working on that on some level for quite some time. But in 2010, that's when I was getting ready to retire, actually. And I was living in a little 2-bedroom condo, which I could easily just lock up and go my merry way and go explore the world. And then, of course, 2008 happened, because I did not think I would see a currency regime shift in my lifetime, actually. But even though I knew that we were near endgame, that kind of changed everything for me. And so I turned around, bought this property, half an acre. I would have gone out, but my children wouldn't, and I would never leave them. So I decided that I needed to kind of make my last stand right where I was. And I bought a half an acre property that I could grow food on. And that was the first thing I did. Was right after I bought that property, I went outside and I started building my beds. I was not a gardener. I was not a farmer. That was nothing. I mean, if I felt like digging in the dirt, I'd go visit a sister and we'd go dig in her dirt. But I know that food is the single biggest issue for people during hyperinflationary and currency regime shifts. So initially it was about preparing for my family. But George, you've been there, right? I don't really know how to do things in a small way. And, when I've appreciated it ever since, but I particularly appreciated it when the pandemic first hit and, you couldn't go anywhere. The grocery store shelves were bare. And I'm walking out in my gardens and, I was able to help people because of what I did. And all of the setup. So, and also medicinal plants, because it's food and then it's medicine. And of course, I don't really use a lot of medicine, but if I have medicinal herbs, everything is like a superfood. So, the goal for me is to have the ability to feed as many people as possible on just my little half acre. It's not very big, but, and then I did it in layers. Right. So I would say, okay, of my mantra pieces, where do I feel most vulnerable? And then I would go in, and if it was security, there was a back door where anybody could have frankly just walked in, pushed it open pretty easy because it's an old house. So that was, I think, the first thing I did about security was put in that security door. So I think everybody really needs to be as independent and self-sufficient as possible, and creating their own little community. I think we have one of the consultants with a couple of his friends are coming out to the farm. They scheduled it, I don't know exactly when, to help. And then of course, they get to harvest, they get to take home. My neighbors get to come in and they get to harvest. They don't get to leave me with nothing, but there's plenty. So, I think it's critically important. You need the silver for barterability. You need the gold for both wealth preservation as well as opportunity positioning, but you cannot eat silver and gold. So you need that food, and you need the medicine, and you need the security, especially when there is unrest in the streets. And what I found, the hole in my strategy, was that I didn't have a place to flee to and bring my family to if it got really, really bad and I felt unsafe. And that really was when they were having the protests near my house, and actually even near my children's house. And they don't live very close to me. I mean, they live in Scottsdale. I live in Central Phoenix. And so that I got buttoned up, but unfortunately it took a long time to get it buttoned up and find the right. I went out and I started looking at remote places with enough property. I wanted it to at least have a well and have the ability to take it 100% off grid. Fortunately, an architect had that vision as well. And so the property that I ended up buying, it has solar, it has wind energy, it has a generator, it has a well, it has 2 huge rain catchments with a filtration system. So it is 100%, and it's very remote. It's very, very remote.
Yeah.
I mean, we've popped Kevlar tires going up there and back. So tires are really important to me right now. We're actually been talking about opening up a tire shop, because every time we go, we seem to pop a tire. It is very, very remote. And that's what I did. I feel so safe up there because I don't think it's not visible from anywhere. and it's large enough with some air mattresses, but it's large enough for my whole family. You've got to have a plan. You have absolutely got to have a plan. And I mean, frankly, planning and helping people create that plan is a lot of what we do here at ITM, because it isn't just about owning gold and silver. It's about being able to sustain a reasonable standard of living for yourself, for your family. I mean, I personally see no way around either hyperinflationary, hyperdeflationary. I mean, it's basically the same thing in my opinion. There's too much insanity out there, admitted insanity, and there is a large loss of confidence that's happening. I think that's what, going back to the credit cards, taking that whole loop and universal basic income and all of that. This is really a think about quieting the masses, and that's the way they do it. They throw breadcrumbs to the masses. It's more than what they had before. So the masses are going, oh, okay, this is not so bad. But I don't think it's going to work this time because it's too big a shift. When they were talking about it, they actually came out, I don't remember who asked this question, but to justify the average income of these bank CEOs to their workers is 900 times one. So it's hard for them to imagine, so they asked, how can you justify that? And they all just said, well, it's the board's choice. So they played it off. And then they also asked if they would accept unions at the banks, if they would support a union coming into the bank. And they all said no. Now, the speaker, whoever asked the question, said, this is a yes or no question. Made it real simple. Would you support that? Would you accept that? Well, there was only one person, Jamie Dimon, that actually came out with that one word reply, which was no. Everybody else talked around it. So in essence, what they said was no. So you're talking about closing that gap, but you're not talking about enabling the workers to have more say. And we've been watching since the 50s, we've been watching unions enrollment go down, 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 down. And I can remember, my father was a developer in New York, and I remember when the union wanted to come into his property, and he paid enough and gave enough benefits that the workers decided not to do that. Mm-hmm. And that's what I'm seeing the banks do, saying, well, we now have minimum wage at $20 an hour, and it's going up to $25 an hour by 2025. But even $20 an hour is not a living wage with the prices of housing and food and insurance and education and all of those costs. It's still not a living wage. Exactly. And I think what you have to do is look at where your biggest holes are. And, how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time? Mm. So you look at what your circumstances are and what you have to work with. Food is something that's actually fairly easy, whether you're living in an apartment and you have no outdoor space to grow, or you have lots of acreage. It's going to be different depending upon where you are. But, it really does not cost very much to buy some sprouting seeds and throw them in your freezer, a few pounds of sprouting seeds, so that you always have live food, or some bags of rice and beans that will hold for a long period of time. So, there are definitely things that you can do. Also, you want it, so it's the food and then the water. There are easy catchment systems that you can make if you live in an area where you do get a lot of rain, like in Florida. There's a lot of rain there. In Arizona, there's not so much. But still, there are catchment systems that you can put up and let nature provide that for you. Or go out and dig a pond. I mean, that's what I did. I dug ponds on my property. And you only have to go down like 3 feet, and you just put in a good filtration, a little filtration system. It's not very expensive. There's lots of how-tos on YouTube, and we're doing some things to help people learn how to do that. So I would basically say what you need to do is you need to write the mantra down and then say, okay, where do I feel the most pain? I mean, silver is not very expensive. You can start to accumulate a little bit and do it sooner than later. And keep in mind, I mean, I think this is critical that people don't necessarily think about, but gold and silver in any form is monetary at its base. So like when the coin dealers were having a hard time getting silver, well, guess what? Go to an antique shop. And I've even had people, the antique dealers, comment on that. Go to like an antique mall, find out who deals in most of the silver there, and ask them if they'll sell you their scrap. The stuff that's broken and bent that they can't sell, they can't put out in the showcases, they'll probably let you have it at spot, because that's more than they would get if they took it to a smelter.
Right.
So the same thing with gold. I mean, knowing this, I accumulated a lot of that stuff over the years. Not so easy to find anymore, but I'd go to yard sales, estate sales, Salvation Army, so secondhand stores, all of that. And people don't realize what they have, and they just think that it's junk, or I don't want to polish it. So you have to look at where you are the most vulnerable and then start to plug those holes in. We are putting together, it's not quite done yet, but we are putting together like a minimum. So if you take the mantra, this is what you would need at a minimum level. So if you are really strapped for cash, okay, well, try to work toward this. If you're more affluent, you can do that. And there are also a lot of properties, well, I don't know, because we've had this massive real estate boom, but there are properties that you can buy and maybe they need more work. I was really lucky because, I managed to find this property, and I do need to put in a food source, but that's it. That's all I need to put in. So we've started plans to put in a hothouse to create food. And in the meantime, I'm doing my buckets of rice and legumes, and now I've got a complete protein. So we are putting together a minimum thing, but it's not, you don't have to have $1 million to protect your family. I mean, that's exactly what we're talking about. That's what it's all about. Because when you are a debt slave, which is really what they want everybody to be, then you have to dance to their tune, whether you like it or not. You don't have any choice. So if everything you have remains in their system, then it's easy to control. And if those that are currently in power that helped get us into this extreme mess, income inequality, I don't care what they say. Income and wealth inequality was built into the very system, the fiat system that they created, because inflation was built into it. And who suffers the most from that?
That's right.
So for them to talk about fighting it, the only reason why they're talking about fighting it is to avoid the revolution, right? So I think that's more with the credit cards and giving people that really can't afford it, and it was interesting too, because they asked Jamie Dimon about the overdraft fees. And because, of course, all the banks came out and said what great jobs they were doing for those that were suffering from the COVID crisis. And he said, well, if they asked if they would reverse those fees, because it was some enormous amount of money, something like, don't hold me to this because I don't really remember the exact number, but something like $2.4 billion worth of overdraft fees that Chase collected in 2020.
Yeah.
Right. And when asked if they would reverse those fees and give all those people back those money, or extend them in loans, or do something to help the community, there was his one word answer: no. Well, it does come full circle. And when you talk about too much liquidity, well, There's a tremendous amount of liquidity that the Fed has created in the system at the same time that they're creating it and buying up those short-term treasuries that then go into the repo and the reverse repo
Yeah, that they just borrow right back from the Fed.
Yeah, it's just this. Exactly. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. It's just insane. You can't make this stuff up. And I get a lot, well, can't they keep doing this forever? Well, no. When you see things going parabolic, it's because they're panicking and the system that they created and all the convolutions are no longer working. Yeah, and they're starting to fall apart. And that's really been true. Well, it's been true for a long time, but very, very true since September 2019.
Right.
They did not fix that. They haven't fixed anything. Mm-hmm. They haven't changed behavior. They've maybe moved it off balance sheet, or they've moved it obviously outside of the banking system, because 2008, it was a lot of stuff that was, and all of the bad loans that were held in the banking system. And so that created the problem. But what they did is they moved it into shadow banks, and which do a lot of the same things as banks, but they don't have the deposits that the banks have. They don't take in the deposits. But the banks loan to the hedge funds and the shadow banks that risk has transferred to, and it's more opaque. That's what they've been talking about. The Fed has been talking about how, like Archegos, you know, that whole, we have not seen the end of the derivative eruption there yet. We haven't seen the end of it. Just because they're not talking about it anymore doesn't mean that it's fixed. It's more about us thinking or not thinking about it. It's that short-termism that they've been pushing us for. But I still believe without a doubt that it will be the derivatives that end up creating a crisis that will send us into the reset. For example, I mean, we all have different goals. For me, my goal is to create dynastic wealth that I can pass on to my children and my grandchildren, because I want them to have choices. But number one, not everybody has children, right? So they would not need to do what I'm doing for myself personally. So that's why all of the strategies are really customized. And the first thing that has to take place is you need to have a conversation and define, what are your goals? What are you trying to accomplish? Right. And then it's the right tool for the job. So that's why we all are, you know, you're in a different circumstance than I am. You're going to have different goals than I do. You're going to have different means to work with than I do. So yeah, it all has to be, all the strategy is basically at the base, it's the same. Mm-hmm. It's what goes on top of it, those nuances that really need to be customized to you, your circumstances and your goals, versus me, my circumstances and goals.